Pandora. Awa's Child by Catul. In 2009, James Cameron, the creator, introduced us to Avatar when he swept us into his arms and swaddled us in the rousing stimuli of a glorious IMAX experience. And since then, well, I've never been the same. Walk with me. You see, friends, as this channel has grown, I've thought a lot about my wants, my fears, and how the ramifications of wearing a blue unitard in front of a green screen could affect future career paths. But what I've realized is I've been hiding a part of myself from you all for far too long. So I think it's time you know the truth. I freaking love Avatar. That's right, when I'm not busy making videos, you wouldn't be hard-pressed to find me speculating on fan forums, organizing my extensive Avatar collection, or just getting cozy with a Blu-ray of my favorite blue hero.
It's a territorial threat display. Do not run.
So what do? Dance with it?
Oh, Jake Sully, you Now, it wasn't easy to come forward with this. In fact, I grappled with this decision for a long time. Much like how Jake Sully grapples with the écran in the second act of the first film. But I think it's time I take the next step. And so, in an astounding betrayal of trust, I've decided to hijack your attention by converting my platform into YouTube's premier Avatar fan channel. Here's a sneak peek of what you can expect. Fan theories. James Cameron, JC. Jesus Christ, JC. Coincidence? Yeah, I don't think so. ASMR.
Oh no, you're hurt. We have to use Sahelu.
Navi lesson. Repeat after me. Oel ningati lau nimperte. Exciting stuff. Now I know that this news might come as a shock to some of you, but I think it's safe to say that with enough time, you guys might really... Oh man, that guy sucked. Hey. Yeah, we got him. Yeah, no, I'm looking at him right now. Okay. Whew. Sorry, folks. Little mix-up today. Allow me to explain. You see, about 2 weeks ago, the CIA managed to secretly clone me into an avatar by extracting my bodily fluids off the seat of my DX Racer. They hoped that my clone would be able to abuse my reputation as a YouTuber to attempt to gaslight you into thinking Avatar actually had a fan base. They failed. Well, they didn't fail. Avatar as a whole failed. I mean, really badly. Somehow a multi-billion-dollar franchise with 2 record-breaking blockbusters has managed to have less cultural impact than the Gremlins. Let's look at the numbers for a second. As of today, the original Avatar currently stands as the highest-grossing film of all time. Yes, there was a brief moment where Endgame overtook it, but James Cameron quickly fixed that by re-releasing Avatar into theaters just to take back the top spot. Pettiness is one hell of a drug. Now, sitting just below Avengers is the Avatar sequel. That's right, on the list of the highest-grossing films of all time, the Avatar franchise occupies 2 of the top 3 spots. So why is it that no one cares? Okay, this might be the wrong place to talk smack about the movie. Let's go home. Boarding. Alright, so what do I mean when I say that no one cares about Avatar? Clearly people are enthusiastic enough to go see it in theaters. But the problem seems to arise when people leave those theaters. But before we get into that, here's a quick message from today's sponsor, Aura. If you've ever looked up your name or email on Google, there's a decent chance your personal info is publicly available on websites you've never even heard of. The worst part is, your info is like digital gold for online data brokers who are more than happy to sell your personal info to crooks like these. That's why I'm using Aura. Aura is an all-in-one data security powerhouse designed to keep your information out of other people's business. Aura specifically shows me what data brokers are selling my info and automatically submits opt-out requests, which not only reduces the amount of spam I get, but ultimately helps protect me from the dregs of our digital society. I also get access to tons of other features like a VPN, antivirus software, and a password management tool, all conveniently packaged into one affordable app. Take back your personal privacy and start regaining your online peace of mind by going to aura.com/slowstart to begin your 2-week free trial. Link is in the description. Seriously, for a sci-fi blockbuster with its level of success, the lack of fandom for Avatar is almost astounding. Just think back on the last 15 years since the first movie. When have you seen a person who owned a single piece of Avatar merchandise? That's not a real person. This guy doesn't exist. I refuse to believe he exists. And the sequel didn't fix that, by the way. You gonna wear this? Or this? Now, before you assume that this is just some crazed, opinionated rant, I'll have you know, I've done the field work, okay? Last Christmas, I took a trip down to the old Toys R Us. Yeah, we still have that in Canada. That's right, fun didn't go bankrupt in my country. And what did I find? Avatar Lego sets, clearance. Avatar action figures, clearance. It gets worse. Turns out the brand new Avatar video game was marked down 40% just 12 days after its release. So I want to try and unpack this. Why is it that Avatar, with all its success, never even came close to amassing a fan base to the likes of other major blockbusters like Star Wars or the MCU? Why hasn't the story cemented itself as a pop culture classic? And is it possible that there's still a chance it could? Well, in order to answer these questions properly, we need to take a look at the man behind it all. James Cameron, award-winning filmmaker, accomplished activist, and underwater explorer extraordinaire. Look at him. Adorable. In 1998, Jim was riding high on the success of Titanic, a romantic tragedy that stood out among his filmography of primarily sci-fi thrillers. But after taking home his Oscars and bestowing upon us a humble acceptance speech,
I'm the king of the world!
Jim was ready to get back to his roots. Turns out Cameron had a little script hidden away about blue aliens living on a psychedelic planet. And while I'm sure this idea had nothing to do with the clam chowder incident of '96, it's still so bizarre to think that this is what was in James's back pocket the whole time he was filming Titanic. I like to think of him behind the camera, just thinking, that's right, Jim, wrap this up. Wrap this up so we can go make history. But as we all know, James did not rush headlong into production for Avatar. In fact, it would be over 12 years before his vision would be realized on screen. And this was simply because James didn't feel like the technology was ready to make Avatar a reality. He needed better CGI, better motion capture. He needed Smeagol. That's right, in 2001, James Cameron witnessed the VFX marvel that was Andy Serkis's performance in Lord of the Rings. And at that moment, he knew it was time to go to Pandora. So James dusts off his script and eventually convinces 20th Century Fox to quite reluctantly fork over $10 million for a proof of concept. A sort of technical demo of what the company can expect from Avatar. And eventually, in 2005, James comes back with this.
You not fear. You strong heart. But stupid!
A triumph. A technical marvel. Fox says, by God, Jim, you did it again. Here's $250 million. Go! Go! Make this picture. Okay, I'm kidding. Fox was still incredibly skeptical and kind of reluctant, but the film was greenlit because James always seems to find a way to get his way. I mean, this is the guy who convinced the same studio to do a sequel to Alien by writing it on a piece of paper, adding an S, and turning it into a dollar sign. This is textbook Jim, though. The guy has always approached everything with passion, but he's also very by the numbers, very methodical. He always refers to audiences as the marketplace, and he has a general knack for knowing what is going to perform well. He's kind of like the Mr. Beast of movies. Oh my god.
What the hell did you just say, Mr. Beast of movie? What does that even mean? You have a platform now. You can't just say dumb shit like...
Sorry, I spaced out there for a second. Anyways, in 2009, James releases the film to wild success. At that point in time, Avatar was undebatably the most stunning film in the history of CGI, and you can just tell by the audience's reactions when they got out of theaters. Strangely enough, though, I could really only find premiere reactions from this one screening in Mumbai, but it's perfect. The lads absolutely love it.
It's awesome. It's great. I don't know. It's out of the world, man. Brilliant. Brilliant.
The film even spawned rumors about viewers becoming so enamored with the film that they became clinically depressed. Post-Avatar depression syndrome, or PADS as it was called by the afflicted, was the alleged phenomenon that occurred to viewers who struggled with the realization that Avatar wasn't real. There were even support forums where viewers discussed their struggle, and it is very embarrassing to read.
The movie was so beautiful, and it showed something we don't have here on Earth.
Oh, you mean like trees? And water? But not everyone was this infatuated with Avatar. The film also drew extensive criticism for having boring characters and a played-out plot that overly relied on its visuals to carry the experience. And yes, it's true, the story of Avatar is nowhere near original. In fact, critics have slammed the movie for having a similar to almost identical plot to stories like You get the idea. But according to James, that was part of the plan. He didn't want an overly complicated storyline to detract from the visual experience, which kind of goes to show where his head was at when making this film. You see, the second half of the 2000s were an undeniable confirmation of where cinema was headed. With films like Iron Man, Transformers, and Avatar, the visual spectacle of storytelling was being brought to the forefront. Suddenly, movies were being referred to as experiences and events. In fact, Avatar's release helped to solidify the decade-long trend of 3D movies, a fad that is only just now starting to fade. So it's quite clear that, at the time, Avatar absolutely had an impact on cinema, and even with the film's critiques, the general reception was still vastly positive. I mean, some people flat out worshipped this movie. Do yourself a favor and look at some of the YouTube comments about Avatar from 14 years ago. It's nuts. People on the internet just spoke differently then. No one was afraid to pronounce their love in a public forum. Nowadays, everyone's too sick with jaded cynicism and irony poisoning. But in 2009, the amount of hype for the film genuinely made it seem like the world was about to delve head first into Avatar-Mania. And then we kind of just didn't. It was a weird phenomenon. Even after breaking box office records, the actual excitement for Avatar never manifested itself into a recognizable mainstream fandom. The film came and went, a string of sequels were announced, and everyone just kind of moved on. Well, almost everyone. You see, I chose my words carefully. While Avatar didn't develop an enormous fan base to equal its success, it still technically developed a fan base. A very fringe one. The following years would see the rise of multiple Avatar fan sites like Na'vi Blue, the Tree of Souls, and Avatar Meet, all made up of fans who were united by Avatar's immersive world building and deeply rooted environmental message. Turns out James Cameron had meticulously crafted a whole world around Avatar, complete with a rich alien culture, scientifically accurate wildlife, and even an entirely learnable language.
It's
quite beautiful, actually. Kind of get lost in his eyes. Now, while the fanbase was admittedly small, the community was still able to organize yearly in-person events where brightly colored cosplayers could gather, juxtaposed by the gloomy atmosphere of a dimly lit community center. In 2012, the group gathered at a Best Western in Seattle, where they held a cosplay contest, went to a museum, and capped off the event with a choreographed dance number. The community also seemed to take Avatar's environmental message very seriously. Numerous past meetups involved nature hikes, camping trips, and even volunteer work at conservation areas. It was incredibly endearing. Avatar fans are kind of like sci-fi hippies that are obsessed with blue aliens and recycling. I don't know, it's interesting. They're like the only nerds that got into something that gave them real life skills, like how to pitch a tent or start a fire. Look, all I'm saying is, in a survival situation, I am picking them over Star Wars fans every time. And yet, when it comes to sci-fi, Avatar fans are almost never included in the conversation. They always seem to be disregarded as some sort of weird fringe group of fanatics that never really got over the movie. How do I put it? Avatar fans are kind of like the horse girls of the sci-fi world. And I really hope people get what I mean by that, or I am going to sound absolutely insane. Sure, Avatar fans might be unpopular and kind of laughed at by the fans of bigger, more renowned franchises. But if you actually get to know them, understand them, you'll realize they're actually pretty cool. Or they might just try to bite you, I don't know. Regardless, no one can doubt their dedication. I mean, this was a fan base that went over an entire decade with practically zero additional media. There were never any books, there weren't any comics, no spin-offs. There was a video game, not a very good one, but for the majority of time, from 2009 to 2022, Avatar fans were riding on the hype of one movie. You can't support a fandom like that. You'd have to supplement, watch the Smurfs or the Jungle Book. I don't know what these guys like. The most depressing part is reading old posts from fans debating when they think Avatar 2 is coming out. Spoiler alert, guys, it gets delayed 6 times. And during that time, Avatar's finite little fan base got smaller and smaller. And then finally, after 13 years, Avatar 2 is ready to release. It was almost surreal. At this point, the entire franchise has been in a complete stasis for over a decade and has utterly evaporated from the public consciousness. But James kind of just barges back into our lives again like an absent father. Well, sorry, Dad. It doesn't work like that. You see, during Cameron's absence, CGI had progressively ingrained itself into the DNA of blockbuster cinema. Pretty much every major movie in the last decade is utilizing visual effects to the nth degree, which means audiences are kind of used to it. So when looking at Avatar from a retrospective point of view, the movie's visual effects aren't really enough to impress. And this is quite strongly voiced by audiences. By 2022, the general sentiment towards the original Avatar has kind of soured since then. After over a decade of floating aimlessly in the ether of the public consciousness, the eventual consensus was that Avatar was an overrated and forgetful movie that relied too heavily on its wow factor. So when press runs eventually start for Avatar 2, it kind of feels like James needs to work extra hard to remind us why we should even care about this sequel. And it's a bumpy start. I mean, at this point in time, there are people online actively preying on this movie's downfall for seemingly no reason. It almost feels like it's suddenly in vogue for people to hate Avatar, and James has to find some way to convince people otherwise. And right off the bat, he's not doing himself any favors. I mean, in one of his first press interviews, he just randomly admits that even his kids don't like the movie, which is depressing.
Yeah, and they're not necessarily big fans of the first Avatar. That's Dad's thing.
Oh yeah, the culmination of my life's work? Yeah, the franchise I will most likely die producing? Yeah, even my own flesh and blood thinks this is a mistake.
But they do like the new film.
And it seemingly gets worse. As I mentioned before, Avatar was known for placing emphasis on its strong environmental message. And Avatar 2 was no different, with a focus placed on themes of ocean conservation. So what could be more fitting than attending a pre-show ceremony in Tokyo consisting entirely of captive dolphins? I mean, look at this. This is the face of a man who is actively trying to look engaged while simultaneously ironing out the logistics of the PR nightmare that will ensue in less than 24 hours. Of course, the actors aren't catching on. I mean, Jake Sully over here seems to love it.
Psst. Hey, Mr. Worthington, you might want to stop filming the fish.
Okay, so to Cameron's credit, he later revealed that he and his cast had absolutely no idea this show was taking place until about 2 minutes before they walked on stage. Which would have been a pretty good explanation had he not said,
Can I come and be in the show? I want to ride.
And these oversights bubbled into other areas as well. There was also a small amount of criticism for releasing a toy line that almost entirely consisted of plastic. I mean, you had plastic action figures, plastic dioramas, and the mother of all plastic toy waste, blind boxes. I don't know. Whether or not you think these criticisms are valid, it certainly gave off the feeling that Avatar's supposedly deep environmental message was only upheld when it was convenient for the franchise. So, by the time the film was set to release, Avatar 2 was seemingly embroiled in a whirlwind of bad press, negative opinion, and flop projections. Heck, even I wasn't sure how it would turn out, and I'm brilliant. But then, the day of release comes. And after an uncertain opening weekend, Avatar does it again, baby! 1 billion in the first 2 weeks, 2 billion after a month. That's right, James said it himself. No, seriously, this was an actual thing he said publicly. But no one seemed to care. After 13 years, Cameron's back like he never left, raining money down on the cynical Twitter plebeians from one of those frickin' Sharkbird things from the movie, probably. And suddenly, we're all left scratching our heads. The movie did well? What about all the hate and the preemptive criticism? Wow, it's almost like negativity sells and the cynical, outspoken minority will create an echo chamber that amplifies a perceived sentiment that actually isn't widely shared. Who knew? Now look, just because the movie made money doesn't necessarily mean it was good. And I'm not even gonna get into that discussion. You can check my Letterboxd for that. But what it does tell us is that regardless of what the sentiment was online, people undebatably showed out for this movie. And the enthusiasm was only growing. After the release of the sequel, the Avatar subreddit went from a humble 20,000 members to over 200,000 during the course of the next year. And with a string of comics announced, a toy line, and a AAA game in the works, it actually felt for the first time like Avatar was here to stay. But sure enough, the game failed to generate any real buzz. The toys went on clearance, and the post frequency on Reddit eventually settled down to near previous lows. Now, this isn't to say the franchise didn't see a growth in popularity, but what it did confirm was that there was still almost no enthusiasm for Avatar beyond the movies. And maybe there never will be. Like I said earlier, in 2009, Avatar helped validate the theory that movies could be more than a story. They could be an experience, an event. And it was this approach to filmmaking that helped keep audiences in theaters during the rise of home streaming. If it didn't save the silver screen, it at the very least kept it healthy. I mean, just think back on the last 5 years. Avatar was an event. Avengers was an event. Trolls 3 was an event. Maybe there's a little bias on that last one, but you get what I mean. Avatar was a theatrical experience of epic proportions. But what happens to a movie that you've just got to see in theaters once it's out of theaters? Does that enthusiasm necessarily translate into real pop culture impact? Well, at least in Avatar's case, no. Either way, it certainly doesn't bother James Cameron. He's never lamented about this in any interviews, and that's because I don't think this was ever his goal. You see, Jim makes blockbusters. He set out to make a high-octane, high-grossing franchise, and that's exactly what he did. So we might never know why the Avatar franchise is a pop culture flop. My best guess is he lost to somewhere in between blue people tail sex and that one frame from Avatar 2 that is still nightmarishly uncanny. Like, Jesus, Jim, we haven't seen these characters in 13 years, and this is the first shot you hit us with. But I digress. Regardless of Avatar's quirks and obvious criticisms, I was excited to see Avatar 2, and I'm excited to see 3, and 4, and 5, and... oh my god. But I think the reason I'm excited is because in a world of reboots, nostalgia cash-ins, and 2-hour commercials, when you see original blockbusters like Avatar, you want to root for them. You want them to do well, because whether you love the films or hate them, it's still better than the impending Mattel Cinematic Universe. They want to do a movie about the 8-ball. You hear about that? The frickin' 8-ball! Thanks for watching, and a very special thank you to my fabulous supporters on Patreon. You guys are so amazing, I went ahead and carved your name on the Tree of Souls. The Chief's gonna be pissed. And if you're not a member, but you want to support the channel, your contribution will directly support the content I make here. A lot of people tend to assume that this is a team effort and that I work with an editor, but in reality, these videos are entirely a one-man show.